I hit the go live so we can go live.
We can go live. We're live.
Happy Sunday, Justin. How are you today?
Happy Sunday to you too. I'm doing pretty good. It's a late night, stayed up late, so late rise. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all.
No. Just it is when you're like playing video games and watching Amazon Prime, I guess. It's like, why are you up until 4 a.m.?
Well, I think we're all doing that right about now. We really are.
Yeah. I think everyone's sleep schedule is a little messed up. Yeah.
Hey, how is everyone doing? We got Tim here, and we've got Richard here, and we've got John here.
Oh, I guess it helps if I'm in the right comment panel too. I'm in the private chat versus the live. I'm like,
there we go.
Anyone.
I hope everybody's doing good out there on this Sunday afternoon. It's beautiful down here. How's it up northwest of me in the Muskegon area, Justin?
It's nice. I mean, it's partly cloudy. Yeah, I know when I wake up and there's shadow, like you get that high contrast on your blinds.
Yeah.
You know that it's a sunny day, but when you wake up and you're like, there's no kind of light creeping in, there's no hard shadows on it.
Right.
Then it's just like, just go back to sleep. It's going to be a Michigan gray day.
Michigan gray day. Boy, we get a lot of those this time of year. Although we're getting out of that season. How's it going, Russ? Good to have you on this beautiful afternoon here. So I know we kind of talked about throughout the week last week, some of the things that we discuss on this Sunday chat. And the one that I really wanted to talk about, I've been talking about it a lot lately, is black and white. And
it's going to be
it's one thing to talk about. Oh, I think somebody's got me in a tab over there.
It was me. Don't worry.
Had to wet my whistle there. So I know it was. I wanted to talk about black and white, and we wanted to make it more than just talking about black and white. And I know you were talking about, the built-in settings in the camera and how we can achieve those looks. So I thought that was a great idea that you had, talking about, that and showing how things are accomplished. So I think we've got a kind of a cool way to do that today, at least with the Olympus cameras. Mm-hmm. I can show, some of my process there actually on the screen, which will be a welcome way to do things instead of me just trying to explain it. And sometimes it's nice to actually show it. So we'll go over that. And what else did you want to talk about today, Justin? I know you had a few other things you wanted to talk about.
Well, you had mentioned the live composite for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Live composite settings. We kind of flirted with the idea of doing the TG, like talk about the TG series,
mm-hmm.
like the 4 through the 6 kind of thing. And
right.
But I think we could probably push that to next week. And
sure.
I have some samples. I know you had some like video samples of going under the water that
mm-hmm.
you were talking about showing. So
yeah. Well, cool. We're kind of putting a teaser out there for next week. Then that's good.
Yeah, it's starting early.
Yeah, no, nothing wrong with that. It gives people time to kind of get an idea if that's something they're going to want to check out, which I think you should. I think everybody needs a good backup camera or something to just throw in their bag or their pocket if they don't want to pack up all their gear. And the TG series is great for that, for sure.
Well, especially if it's going to talk. I mean, especially since it does a lot of what we're talking about doing. It has the live composite, has that awesome macro function built in. It's actually micro. It's not even macro.
Right. Yeah. It's beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And it does it. So some really advanced features like live composite. And you've also got the focus stacking and bracketing in the camera, mm-hmm. which is great, especially, for those macro shots where the depth of field usually ends up being, razor thin.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it'll be a good, interesting show on Sunday for sure to talk about that. Plus it gives me more time to capture some more images and video with that camera as well to share.
Yeah. I should get on that too this week. There's my homework.
There we go. Yeah, we've got work to do. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we've got work to do, man.
So we got Bob Panicon, and we've got Brad Walker, and we've got the infamous Jerry James, who's saying iPhone.
Yeah.
I'm not talking, dude. I'm an Android guy.
So am I.
I'm not I was gonna say I'm not one of the sheeple that has an iPhone, but okay, this is horrible. But I'm doing this from my iMac, and I preach all about having a Mac for a computer. So I'm on both sides of the fence with this one. I just like the Android phone. So sorry, Jerry. So let's start talking about the black and white. That was the big thing I was excited about doing, was talking about black and white and going through image share, and then also sharing some settings and how some of that stuff is done as well. Brad says laptop. Okay. That's holding your laptop up to your face to make those phone calls. This is a little difficult, Brad, but I can honestly say I've tried it once or twice. So I guess let's just jump right into black and white. And I again have a whole bunch of images to share, and they're going to be all over the board as far as subject matter, processing techniques, in-camera processing techniques, and the like as well. So I don't want to make this all about imagery constantly, but I mean, come on. I mean, that's what we are. We're photographers, so we might as well start by sharing some photos, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to throw these up here, and there's no need to see them on the full screen. So I'll just keep Justin and I here. So Justin, we can't pick our noses or rub our eyes. Okay. So the first shot I've got up here is, I know Justin had spoken the other week. He really has an affinity for the is it cyanotype, where it's got the kind of a bluish hue to it?
Yeah, okay. It's something that I kind of picked up in Nik software, and that's when we did our follow up to the WZZM photo challenge that we kind of put out there. Okay. That was something I kind of illustrated, was Nik software and how the copper toning and cyanotypes and stuff like that. So.
Yep. So this image, unfortunately, in the share doesn't really show through. And again, probably because it's very, very lightly done. But this almost has a sepia feel to it. And it was done with a sepia process, just dialed back on the layer that the sepia was done on. So this was done in post, not in camera. But your bringing up the cyanotype last week got me thinking about, I do have a series of images that I had done in the past where I had experimented with sepia toning the images, and I always had a struggle with where it looks good or why it would look good. And this is really corny sounding, but I think that I've got a series of images. I'm not going to share all of them today. I just brought this one up. But I have shots from like Arizona and Utah, and something in my head just tells me like Old West, tintype images, things that were shot, in the 1800s or what have you, that would have had that look to them. So, and I noticed when I started going through some of my images on Flickr and in my catalogs that the ones where I did actually do the sepia toning were generally desert or things like this one where it was cattle, something that had this Western feel to it. And I would definitely invite people that are in the chat, if you've got any experience with color toning your black and white images, to mention it in the comments and what makes you decide when you're going to use a specific process for color toning a black and white. I need to get my head out of this thought that sepia is just an Old West thing and do something more than cattle and deserts with it. And again, sepia toning is something that the Nik software does really well, as well as the type that Justin has been using as well. Again, the images I'm sharing, the first couple just kind of random and just going over different looks and some of the thought process behind those. Like this one, if you're from West Michigan, chances are you may have seen the big strawberry. Do you know where this is, Justin?
Yes, it's that road in Spring Lake. It's the main drag, and it goes straight down. It's on the left side if you're heading east. And I don't know what the intersecting road is, but I know where it's at here.
Yeah.
I don't need addresses. I know. I keep everything up here. Yep.
Perfect. Yep. I just figured I'd share a little West Michigan action here. But another thing that I like to experiment with, and this is done with Nik, and I had these images brought up, with Nik specifically because of your talking about it the other week. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, you're using did you use the analog effects for this?
Yes.
Because I see the little, like the wet plate kind of process gritty stuff in the background.
Yes.
I'm like, is that a dirty sensor? I'm like, no, wait, those are splotches.
It's a lot of fun, and it's something that opens up, I think, a lot of creativity with people is Nik. So for me, Olympus camera is one of the things that I love about it is that because of all the things that are built into it, it's just fun. It just makes photography fun. Me and Mike Banning used to joke. It's, when people switch to Olympus cameras, they switch from photography to photography because everybody says, "Oh my gosh, this is so fun." Nik software is kind of the same way for me when it comes to processing, getting this wet plate look and getting the smudges on the glass plate and the crazy bokeh and tilt shift, focusing that you can get in Nick with the analog effects is a lot of fun. And, again, I personally feel like treatments like this lend themselves really well to a black and white images. Again, personally for me, more so than color. I've done this sort of look on color images, and it's for me, mentally a tougher sell on the image.
It gets gritty. It like muddies up the waters, and I've never been a fan.
Yeah. I like the way you put that. It muddies up the waters. And with black and white imagery, grain is a common thing. You're used to seeing graininess in black and white film photos. So if you start to muddy them up a little bit in post using some of these techniques, like with Nick, I think it just kind of adds to the look and feel and the mood of the image more in black and white than in color. So,
and if I could chime in, kind of add to that point,
for sure.
Something that we have to think about too is how we relate to images. Even though we might not be photographers or we're not really diving into, we talked a lot last week about like art history, as we kind of dived into some things. And you could make the argument that a lot of people haven't really seen like catalogs of photographs. They haven't really done a lot of research on different photographers, but they have seen old photos. And when, with just on a screen, or you're opening up your family's collection of antiquity, you've seen like what old photographs look like. We've seen photos from the Civil War, and what did they shoot on? They did it on ground glass, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of that we can draw the parallel between the two is like, well, I've seen old photos in black and white that look like this, and that's why they look right in black and white monochromatic, but they don't look right in color.
Yeah, I love that explanation, or that analogy, or that insight into that for sure. So we have a question. Actually, Russ Smith was asking about the Facebook challenge for this week. What was the Facebook challenge?
John Thomas was asking about it too. That's something that I still have to kind of figure out. I don't know what to do for the next Facebook challenge for this week. It's, I thought about self-portraits, but then somebody's like, no, please don't do self-portraits. I don't want to shoot myself. So I've got to think of something like we did black and white, and like, hey, maybe we can come to a conclusion today, but I think I'll post it today. That gives everyone the full week to kind of work on it. We'll come back to it Friday at 6 for the live broadcast. So
cool.
Yeah.
Good idea on that. I like that. Everybody needs a little challenge. Everybody needs a little something to kind of give them a kick in the seat to get out there and shoot. It's kind of tough to stay motivated right now during all this stuff.
And why not? I mean, it's the perfect time a lot of people look at it, and it's not to go off on this tangent about, quarantine and stuff, but it actually is a good time for self-reflection. We've got plenty of time to think, don't get depressed, like go out there and do something to better yourself. A lot of people are like changing their diets. People are working out. People are getting out and being active. So why not be out being active, doing photography, doing what you love to do, and use this time to grow as a photographer. And so the challenges are just there to kind of like, hey, here's a good excuse to go do it. We can look at our images on the back end and kind of talk about them and just see what everyone's creating, and being able to see other people do work and looking at their work it's like cross inspirational. It's like, oh, I see what they're doing. It's like, I really like what they did. I'm going to go out and because you're seeing through someone else's eyes, it makes you think critically about your work. And so how you will approach it the next time you go out and shoot. So
definitely. So it's funny. Tim Hanko says, shooting himself makes him want to shoot himself. I understand that. I really do.
Yeah. Self-portraits can't be that bad, people. They just can't.
It's all right here. It's all right here. You shoot yourself the way you would shoot someone else, it's going to be perfectly fine.
Yeah. Just practice a little vanity. Don't be shy.
Yeah. So Jerry says a cell phone challenge, and that's actually not a bad idea. I like that.
Actually, that I'm not opposed to. And actually, I probably will roll with that because, there's, again, Chase Jarvis is one of my favorite photographers, and he's got a book. I want to run to my room and go get it. But the best camera is the one that's with you. Mm-hmm. And, your cell phone is with you like almost 100% of the time.
Yes.
And their cameras aren't anything to bat, shy away from these days, especially because of computational photography. They're making a lot of leeway with that. So,
oh yeah, it's astounding what you can do with a cell phone for sure.
I should show you what I did last night. It's crazy.
Yeah, bring it up, cue it up if you get time while we're doing this for sure. Show people what's possible with the latest cell phones. It's again pretty amazing.
Can I send it to you in Messenger?
Yeah, you sure can. So it's funny that Jerry suggests a cell phone challenge, and I've actually got a couple of photos of Jerry here that I'm going to share through this. Like the one that I've got up here right now. Excuse me. One of the things that I like about black and white, I think it's a lot easier to draw your eye to a subject using light, easier in black and white than it is color. While again, everyone kind of knows, that your eye is drawn towards the lightest part of an image just naturally. It's kind of how our brains are wired. It's easier to show those light spots in a black and white image than it is in color. So that's one of the things that I like to play around with in black and white is those scenes where I do have a strong focal point where light is creating that focal point intersecting with my subject. And I'll have other examples of that coming up as well as as I'm going through these. But someone earlier said, oh, Brad Walker, perfect. This really segues well into what the next couple of images I will share are going to be. So Brad said, step out. And I know that he was talking about stepping out of your comfort zone, when we were talking about the self-portrait things. Self-portraits being a genre of photography, just like street photography. And that is not my wheelhouse. That is not where my comfort zone lies. I'm about as comfortable with street photography, I think, as I am with shooting portrait work. And I've got your images coming in right now, Justin. I'll start downloading those as we talk. So the next images I'm sharing, the reason I'm sharing them is strictly because, again, I feel like black and white is one of those genres of photography that lends itself to some things better than others. Great example, my friend Shelly is constantly telling me that food photography is probably the last thing you want to do in black and white. And I can't agree more. I don't think I've seen really too many food photos ever that look good in black and white. Food is it's as much about sight as it is about smell, as it is about taste. And unless you were born only seeing things in black and white, then you probably don't want your food to look black and white, if you know what I mean.
Well, and to add to that, when I was in school, we did in editorial class. They kind of encouraged us to shoot in black and white for the class, and we went to the kitchen because I went to the Art Institute, one of the Art Institute schools in Minnesota, and our culinary program was really good. So on the 4th floor, we went up. There's a huge kitchen. Everyone's working, fixing food and stuff. And I captured all my images in black and white because that was kind of like, oh, well, I thought we were trying to emulate, editorial style photography. Yeah. And when you look at like sweet potato fries that are just like 3/4 gray, they don't look too good. No. And to segue from that, like how you were saying, like how people kind of respond to the color of food. I would encourage anyone who wants, and I've told several customers this. There is a series on Netflix called Chef's Table, and Chef's Table is just
beautiful.
It's in my mind, it's the cinematography in that, the way that it's shot, the way that it's lit, the way that they approach that, the way they show that, show things to you. Right. It's just beautiful. And the way that these chefs talk about their food is inspiring. And so I would encourage anyone who wants just to kind of get inspired by something that's not even related to your craft, like visually, you'll be able to respond, because when you have to think about watching a video or a movie or a show, think of those individual frames being frozen on your screen as a photograph, because that's just what photos are, just moving photos. So, that's something I just wanted to add, is that I just like watching that every now and then, because it's like, man, I want to be as into creating photos as this guy is about creating this food, and how people respond to it. It's just interesting. So you guys should go do that.
Yeah, it's definitely a good watch. I think I've watched 1 or 2 episodes of that, and obviously presentation is everything with the food that they're showing on this, the meals that are being prepared. And it might actually give you some ideas on doing some food photography in your own home during this time. A good thing to do, like Justin said, is hit pause.
Yeah.
It's not like the old VHS days when you hit pause and everything had weird lines and you couldn't make anything out. Everything's digital now, so when you hit pause, it's nice and crystal clear. Take a moment when the meal has been plated and it's set on a table for display, pause it then start looking on the plate. Look for the specular highlights on the plate. Get an idea of where light placement was when they were filming this, because the same lighting that made the filming look good is going to make a still photo look good as well. So that's something that I do a lot in movies. If I see a scene that I think is really interesting in a movie, I'll pause and I start looking at actors' eyes, trying to pick out where catch lights are at, trying to start deconstructing where shadows are falling and figuring out how they're lighting the scene. Not like I've ever taken anything like that and then went out and tried to replicate it necessarily, but just kind of making yourself aware of what makes something look a certain way kind of helps you recognize, when you're out, hey, this has a similar feel to it, oh, that's right, these lights behind me are probably, kind of creating a similar look to that scene that I was so enamored with. Or like we said, you can reconstruct it at home as well.
Well,
sorry, my phone is ringing. So okay. Loud.
So the thing I find interesting with that is, like you're saying, like, hey, look at the food. In that instance, I would say, yes, look at the food. But like, I love watching movies. I used to work at Blockbuster, so it was kind of like one of those things, for 4 years, you had to be a movie expert, right? So you had to kind of take in all these movies and be able to give good suggestions. But when I was going to school for photography, now I start looking at film in a different way. Like you're saying, I look for where the light's coming from. I look for the catch lights. I look for the inconsistencies in light. It's like, okay, the lady's in the kitchen, and you'll see this in movies from like the 90s and 2000s. Every time there's a man talking in a kitchen, the light may be falling differently on him, but somehow she still has a hair light on her in the background.
Yeah.
So it not only do I look for what was like, oh, that was really shot really well, that's lit really well, that's a really beautiful scene. Like, freeze those beautiful scenes and try to recreate them yourself. That's what I try to do right here. But also I love looking for the inconsistencies, like that, just like light wise, if the light's coming in from the window behind him, and when they shoot him and he's like darkly lit and you look at her, like, yeah, her face should be lit, but where's that light on the back of her head coming from?
It feels like that with every scene shot at night to me, especially like these scenes where they're in the woods at night and there's this bright light behind them, that gives all this ambience and mood to the scene, but then they're perfectly well lit from the front. It's like, okay, I mean, I get where you're going. You have to show people's faces and in the environment, but completely unrealistic. So kind of going back to uses for black and white, again, for me, street photography almost is exclusively in black and white. I think when it's done right, it can kind of give, I hate the term, a timeless look, but it can help remove a feeling of time from the image. I mean, obviously you can look in the background of this image here, this gentleman in San Francisco or Hollywood, that, it's obviously a modern car in the background or what have you, but had the car not been there, it might be a little bit tougher to kind of pick a day and date and time and all of that with this, so you can kind of get away, remove yourself from, again, a time period necessarily with an image by doing black and white. And I think we mentioned it the other week when you and I were talking. We were talking about higher ISOs and grain and noise and things like that. One of my go-to treatments for that is to move it into black and white. Now, again, if you're used to seeing black and white film that's been processed, lots of it, has a grainier feel to it anyway. So it's a good way to get out of a sticky situation with an image if you move it into black and white, if it's something that lends itself to black and white. This one has a really heavy grain effect because it was done in camera with Olympus. There's one of their art filters is the grainy film. And I'm a big fan of that for street photography. It's really fun. I just set my camera to RAW plus JPEG. The JPEG comes out with the black and white grainy film look to it. And then I still have a RAW file that's full color, nice and clean and sharp if I want that to treat it a different way. But again, I just kind of have a thing for doing the black and white images in the street. Again, same kind of thing here, walking through Chicago. and this young lady was sitting with a gentleman, and they were lighting up gigantic cigars. And I just thought it was kind of fun and interesting to see this woman with a cigar that's probably as big as her forearm getting ready to light it, sitting there out on her afternoon lunch with her friend there. Again, another shot of Jerry James and Rick Kefgen in the background there. This was shot outside of your guys' store last summer with
a Fuji, right?
Yeah, with the medium format camera, the GFX 100.
Yeah,
a lot of fun shooting that there with those guys, big time. Shot in Philadelphia. There's a skate park there that's underneath the highway overpass. I think it's FDR Skate Park, and just hung out there with a bunch of skaters. That used to be part of my life for about 20 years, big into that scene. So hanging out with those guys in this gritty urban environment, just a slow shutter speed to get this guy cruising by, and again, this was with the Pen F and I think the 8mm fisheye probably is my guess. Or no, the body cap lens, the 9mm body cap lens on the Pen F.
That's a fun lens.
Oh, it's so fun. You don't have to think. You literally just pick your camera up and just point it in the direction you want to shoot and start taking your photos. A lot of fun, especially with something like this. You've got the distortion from the fisheye. We're under this overpass, and everything gets really distorted and twisted. And I tried to keep the skater in the center frame as he came up this embankment here. So he's not too distorted other than the motion from him skating by. Just a shot of one of my kids up north. Again, just there's something about black and white that I think it lends itself just as much to shooting people as it does, landscape and architecture. I kind of feel like there are very few subjects that black and white isn't really powerful in, again, other than food photos.
And I think the other thing it lends itself to is the fact that with black and white, the absence of, you're not distracted by the color.
That's exactly right.
I don't know if you mentioned that, and that's last just week,
yeah,
it's just one of those things where you can focus, you have to focus more on the things, on the elements that describe the photo. So you're looking for contrast, and you're looking for low tones or low tones or dark tones. And, it helps with texture. You look at texture, you look at shape, you look at lines, you look more at the elements outside of the color. And that's the thing, is this color can just be really distracting.
Yeah, for sure. Without a doubt. And it's funny because landscape is comprised of so much color. And yeah, I find myself really drawn to shooting black and white landscapes. It's been a while since I've kind of immersed myself in it. And when I do go out to shoot black and white landscapes, I think when I can remember to pick it up off the shelf, this is one of my most favorite ways to shoot it is with an infrared converted camera. There's a humongous difference between shooting an infrared versus shooting a full color image and then doing the conversion to black and white. Now, one of the obvious ones, I guess, that people are probably used to seeing is that green foliage turns this bright white. But aside from that, my most favorite draw to it is that your blue skies turn black. Excuse me. So this conversion on this camera that I'm shooting, this is an OMD EM1 that I had, the original Mark I, that I had converted to infrared through a company I think they're in Arizona. They're called Life Pixel. This is an 830 nanometer conversion. And I can go into more about that offline out of this discussion here. If people have questions, they can reach out to me about different conversions for infrared cameras. But I can tell you this much just really briefly, that 830 nanometers is no color information at all hitting your sensor. Camera has been converted purely to shoot black and white images. So this is just a shot in Cades Cove and Smoky Mountain National Park. And as the light is kind of working its way across the valley here, that was kind of the moment that I was waiting for, is for it to light up this row of trees in between where I was positioned and the mountain in the background there. And another benefit for landscape photographers with an infrared converted camera is that any haze that you might see in the background, so if you got summer days and it's kind of hazy off in the distance, it completely eliminates that haze. It cuts through it. So the science behind it, I'm not 100% up to speed on, but it's basically the refraction of the wavelength of light that gets refracted in haze is kind of eliminated or filtered, removed, via the conversion to infrared, so you kind of eliminate that haze in the background. So it's why it's one of my favorites to do. You also get a lot more contrast in a black and white image that is done with an infrared camera. So things like structure in clouds, things of that nature really start to stand out and pop. So this is just a summer storm that was brewing off in the distance, and I kind of raced to get myself positioned so that I could show a little bit of foreground with nothing in it, just to add to the immensity of this storm system that was moving its way towards me. And I think it kind of worked out pretty well. Again, this is with the OMD EM1 Mark 1 with a infrared conversion, and the lens that was on here was the 12-100.
Oh, so you're saying that's not ahead of Cauliflower that you shot at that
right
at Horrocks? Yeah,
right. It's crazy. I'm a humongous storm chasing freak, so.
Well, and one thing I'd like to point out, Jamie, with like your last two landscapes that I find that, especially the last one prior to this, is like triangles. I love the little triangles, like the layers of triangles. You got like, if you've ever taken those old, you go to art fairs and you put the colored sand in kind of the thing.
Oh yeah, I see that.
So that's kind of how I look at that, is like, again, you have to break down images by their basic shapes. And landscapes, typically when you're looking at the rule of thirds, if there's always a third that's, of less interest and 2/3 that's more of interest. And I just love the little layers. You got the dark, the light. There's kind of like that medium dark, but it kind of feels like one big triangle and then a little kind of top triangle on the top of the mountain range. And then when you have your clouds there to the next one, you just got these four different layers. Yeah.
Very fun. And that's, these two, they kind of go back and show one of the things that I really like to do in all landscape photography. Infrared, black and white, doesn't matter. I love to shoot in portrait orientation with a lot of sky in my images. Again, we're doing a screen share, so the resolution doesn't show up as great on a screen share as it does, looking at the image, full resolution in person. But the amount of detail that you get in an infrared converted camera is different as well. There's just a lot more contrast. So if you've got something like this, a piece of rusty equipment where there would have been paint, flaking up, you can see very, very well defined edges around everything. It's a really fun thing to do with a camera. And if you can find an old camera and get just a really good deal on it and have a little bit of extra money, send it off to Life Pixel and have it converted to infrared. It is so much fun to shoot this way, for sure. The barn that I shoot all the time. This was actually the first image that I shot with that camera. Once I received it back, I ran out to the one place that I know I can always go and feel comfortable shooting. So I ran out there to do this because I had nice clear skies for the most part. And I wanted to see the black sky that I would get from this as well. So of course that's where I went out, just to the barn. But it's these images right here. These next two images are really some of my favorite examples of black and white done via infrared, just because of the foliage. So this is a lush green field, early summer. So the growth is real low, but it all translates over to, this white hue as well as this tree. And I just sat here and I was watching as I pulled up to the spot I shoot regularly because it's part of my daily commute to work, watching the light kind of ripple and work its way across these hillsides. I was just enamored with it. So I sat there for about a half hour just waiting and hoping and praying that I would get light, to come across the tree. And it finally did at one point, and I was kind of zoomed out a ways when I took the shot. But a lot of fun to just watch what the light is doing and just wait for those decisive moments. But again, infrared, if you're a black and white lover, you really owe it to yourself to get your hands on one and give it a shot and play with it. So Russ Smith, good question. So I have printed, hold on. There we go. All right. I have printed some of the black and white images, just a couple of them, 3. The largest I've done is a 16x20, and that was for someone who wanted to buy a print. And they translate really well into print. I've just done standard prints. I haven't done anything like a metallic or anything like that yet. And I probably should kind of run some off that way just to see how they turn out on metallic paper, metallic inks, or, another process. but I'm really floored with the amount of detail that comes out of them in print as well. So
a glossy white metal print would be
yeah. And
like
I'll tell you
ideal.
what, I haven't done really anything of mine on metals yet.
That's all I print on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely want to try that too. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. It's again one of my favorites, one of my favorite spots to shoot. So all right, and then I'll just kind of zip through the next couple of images. I won't bore everybody with like a nonstop barrage of my photos here, but again, so another infrared shot. These images I've been showing you are all with a dedicated converted infrared camera. Bonus to doing an infrared converted camera before we go on to the next ones is that you really only lose about a stop of light. Whereas you can get filters that do like an infrared cutoff, but it's almost like using an ND filter. Actually, it is like using an ND filter. If you buy a 720 nanometer screw-on infrared filter, you'll find that when you look through it, it's like looking through a piece of welding glass. It is very, very dark. So on a day like where this image was shot, there was a breeze, obviously, because the clouds were moving as I was watching light move. What you end up with the screw-on filter is an extremely long exposure, minutes.
Yeah, wispy.
Yeah, so you lose any kind of definition in the trees. The leaves are all moving. The grass becomes a blur and things like that. Whereas with an infrared converted camera, you lose a stop of light. So worst case scenario, you might go from ISO 200 to 400, or if your camera's native at 100, from 100 to 200 or something to bump up your shutter speed to start freezing the action again. Now, when you switch to something like these next couple of shots that were shot with a screw-on filter that was an infrared filter, there's nothing wrong with wetting your feet in infrared photography with a screw-on filter. Just go into it knowing that you're probably going to be doing a lot of long exposures. So that's exactly what we're seeing here. Just and you don't get as deep of a dark sky as you would with a full-blown conversion, but you do get a very distinct, unique black and white image versus something that would be done in camera. So this was done with just a cheap, I think, Hoya screw-on filter. I think it's a 720 nanometer. I'm sure Justin can get you, probably order those in if it's not something that they carry from whoever. Who do you guys use for filters? Who's your big brand?
ProMaster is the big one. They have their new neutral density ones are infrared neutral density, but I don't think they do what this is doing. Like I know what you're talking about with the actual infrared ones. So
if the camera store doesn't have it, you can find them online anywhere else. Just to kind of get your toes in the water with some infrared. Just go into it knowing that they're going to be long exposures.
And the issue with the store ends up being that you've got to carry everything from like 105 all the way down to 37 millimeters. And
right.
And if we make an investment in those filters, we're looking at spending like over $1,000 on filters, and I might sell like 2 of them.
Right. Right.
Now that could change. That can always change. But we'll kind of because we're retooling. During the whole quarantine thing, we're retooling to kind of be in a better spot to be able to branch out and do more with things. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Another reason to support local stores, so they can do things like that. I mean, if you're not shopping at your local store, then they're not going to know that there's an interest, or they're not going to be able to do it because they don't have the driving, customer base behind it. So,
well, and it's like if we have sales on other things, not just like cameras, accessories, and prints and stuff like that, like those secondary sales, those not arbitrary sales, anything outside of cameras, those things help support bringing in other items. It's like if you can sell more bags, it's like, hey, well, we're selling more bags, we can carry more of that bag or add something else. So
yep.
Yeah.
Another example of just the screw-on filter as well. You can see the foliage doesn't do that whole thing where it gets extremely bright white. This is probably a 3 or 4 minute long exposure. The wind was very, very, very light that day. So the trees stayed, moderately crisp. I got a lot of movement in the water. It just turns it into this beautiful glassy finish. And that's it for the infrared stuff. And the rest, I don't even need to share these. These are just kind of travel photos from a few different places. Let me throw yours in here though, Justin, and we'll get you get your stuff queued up. And while we're doing that, I'll let you jibber jabber for a minute, and I'll drag your photos over here.
Jibber jabber. A pity the fool who jibber jabbers. I saw a lot. I did see somebody who was tuning in from Germany on your YouTube channel.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, Brit tuning in from Germany. So Guten Tag. And I know. Let's see. We were talking, just kind of following up on some of what other people were saying. Scott Kilby says to get a great image, start with a great subject. Hence, you'll never take a great self-portrait. Is it Rob's still on the whole, not going to take a portrait of myself thing?
That's a good one.
The other thing I was thinking of, I've seen some comments of black and white is wonderful for abstraction of reality. And that was something I was thinking about too, outside of cell phone images, was doing abstract photos.
Yes.
Because I've got plenty of those, because I love shooting abstracts, because again, you can do those in color and you can do those in black and white. And it's just nice because you're really you're looking for the shape. You're looking at, if you have contrast in color, you can have contrast between light and dark. You can have contrast between smooth and like gritty texture. So it's just really, abstraction is really fun. So I think I'll do cell phone images first, and then I'll do abstraction second. So
cool. Can I get in on that? I want to do some cell phone shots.
Yeah, dude, you can participate. Like we'll be live 6:00 on Friday.
Good deal. Cool deal.
Yeah.
So really quick before we jump into the images that I have queued up that you sent over, I'm going to show everybody really quickly who is an Olympus user. Just one of my quick setups for easy black and white photography in camera. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy shooting this way. So I'm just going to disappear for a minute and show you guys my crosshairs. So what you're actually seeing is my OMD EM1 Mark II is the one I've got hooked up to my camera. So if you have your super control panel pushed up, and let me just make it.
Yeah. Oh, you can go full screen with it, Jamie. I'd rather have people see the whole super menu.
Okay, so if you pull up your super control panel, probably the quickest and easiest way to get to this. You can see what I've got highlighted up here is your color profiles. You can roll through these. You've got all these different settings. You can go through all your art filters, and let me take the lens cap off, and you can kind of get a peek into what we're looking at here. There we go. So you're looking at my couch. So we'll pull up and we'll go back and we'll get ourselves into monochrome. So this is one way to shoot a black and white image. If you set your camera to RAW plus JPEG, there we go. Come on. It's not going to let me do it, probably because I'm sending you my, the live feed from the camera. But anyways, so, this is just straight monochrome, right out of the camera. But what I like to do to change that for landscape photography is, oh boy, my camera's acting haywire. So you can go into your sharpness. I like to bump the sharpness up to +2. The same with the contrast, and constantly jumping out of this menu here. So your color filter, I changed that to red. If you change that to red, what you end up getting is your blue skies get that really dark look, almost to black, very similar to what you would find, with an infrared converted camera.
Yeah, I was going to say
my dog's not dead. It's alive.
it treats greens the same way.
Exactly. And if you're shooting people, I think, or the orange filter is probably, I think, what a lot of people use in black and white for when they're shooting people, if I'm not mistaken.
Unless you want to do like the crazy skin, like where you have darker skin, a lot of freckles. I think that's like the green or blue filter.
Yep. So then I also get into, and it's your
S curve.
Yeah. So you can actually go in and manually adjust your highlight and shadow control here. So I like to drop my shadows down and get really deep, dark blacks, so I have like a stronger transition from light to dark, shifted more towards the dark side. So these are just kind of my go-to settings for if I'm just going to switch my camera into black and white mode on Olympus and go out, especially when it comes to like street shooting. These are definitely my go-to. So I switch over my color profile to monochrome, sharpness to +2, contrast to +2. The color filter, I always leave it on red, even though it's not necessarily something ideal for like city streets per se with skin tones, but just for buildings and being in back alleyways, I like the look that this gives. This is where Justin would jump in and probably switch from over to this. What do we call that again? It says blue, I think, on the camera.
It's your tint.
Yep.
Yeah, cyanotype. Yep.
So I just leave mine on neutral. And then again, I go down to my highlight and shadow control and I kind of pull down the shadows a little bit deeper just so I can get a more moodier look. And again, here is where you would switch from raw. You'd put it to raw plus JPEG. And then again, the bonus is, like you can see now, what you see through the camera is the black and white image. So it helps you develop that sense of what's going to look good in black and white. And I know we're all familiar with being in that position where we go out shooting, we shoot in color, we get home, and then what we do is we say, okay, so which one, is this going to look better in color or black and white? And then we post the two side by side on Facebook and we say, hey, you guys, color or black and white? If you set up this way and go out, you're just going to know which one looks better in color, black and white, because you saw it in your camera and you made that conscious decision to shoot it that way in black and white. I think Justin's chatting with his girlfriend over there. He's looking down.
What girlfriend? No, I'm actually. If you're talking about my girlfriend, then yeah.
Passionate affair with the camera.
That's the only affair I have.
There we go. So TMI. So that is basically just my quick go-to for black and white. Again, the Olympus cameras have other options for black and white baked into them. What I did here, I'm sure that there is probably some sort of variant on most other camera systems, maybe not to the degree that it is on the Olympus as far as color filtering goes and being able to adjust your S-curves or your highlight and shadow control. But I would suggest people give it a minute today or tomorrow sometime soon. Get your camera out and look for this similar settings on your camera as well and try and emulate that on yours. Again, DSLR users, you're going to want to be in your live view mode so that you can look at the back of the screen to see in black and white, because obviously an optical viewfinder is not going to show you that in black and white. So good information here from Jeffrey McFeeters, and Jeffrey's an astounding photographer. So he says he uses the yellow filter for portraits and people and street, and the red for landscape, and then green for foliage because it lightens up the foliage of deep greens and gives you a more natural look. Good to know. Especially maybe I'm going to change up my color filter when the next time I go out street shooting and see what yellow looks like. I know I've just kind of defaulted to the red because it ends up, for me, even in street shooting, I spend a lot of time trying to get some sort of sky in my scenes. I just can't get that out of my head that I need sky and everything. So, but maybe I will put a little more emphasis on people and keeping the camera down low and see how that yellow filter looks. So thank you, Jeffrey. I appreciate that tip. And Mike Hedge is asking, does the S curve on the highlight and shadow control differ a lot from using the high on gradation curve on the super control panel? I haven't compared them side by side, but the control is a little more granular when you do it in the S curve, whereas the gradation selections in the camera are just, whatever's baked in from the engineers at Olympus. What they decided was probably the appropriate treatment for highlights and shadows. So it would be interesting to do a side-by-side comparison. If you do that, Mike, I'd love to hear about it. And if you want to come on one of the shows and talk about it, that'd be kind of cool too. Something to educate people on. I'm always game for that. And Jeffrey has more to add. He says, black and white in the EVF with the +2 sharpness and +2 contrast really helps to give a good idea of what is interesting and complex and highly textured scenes, because colors are either too bright to allow us a good idea of what is really interesting or too muted in some cases, so we miss out on some really compelling scenes where the story is the contrast. Well put. Okay, it's funny. So those are the settings that I use. Not having the words to explain why they work so well for me. I think Jeffrey just basically laid it out there for kind of got inside my head and said, Jamie, this is probably why you like that so much. I think I 100% agree with him on that. It does make sense going back and kind of looking at the images that I shot and being able to see that scene in the viewfinder the way that I saw it, that starts to make a lot more sense that way. So we've got a good audience today. I'm kind of feeling like we could just step aside and we'll just let, Jeff and Mike and some of these guys just do the show.
We'll let everyone else do it. I will add, Jamie, that you showed everyone how to do the monochromatic mode.
Mm-hmm.
If you I'm in aperture priority on mine right now.
Yeah. Do you want me to you want me to bring it up and I'll just emulate what you're describing?
Yeah.
On camera? Okay, let's do that. Give me 1 second.
Because what Jamie just illustrated was how to do it in the monochrome mode on the camera. I typically shoot with the art filter mode. Now, so you would hit menu.
Oop, hold on here. Let me reset back and just get completely back into just a standard.
Oh no, you're fine. You can do it from wherever. You just have to be in aperture priority.
Okay. So I don't know about doing. Okay, so here, let's give it a shot. So we get into the menu.
Yep, and you're going to go to camera 2.
Mm-hmm.
And your bracketing is turned off, so you have something turned on that doesn't allow you to have your bracketing turned on.
I'm not sure what I've got going on here. Let's see.
Maybe
were you gonna do like art bracketing?
Yeah. It's so if people wanted to shoot more than one black and white filter, you can actually go through and when you do the bracketing, you go down to your art bracket, you go over and turn that on. You can go through. You could set up a custom one, which I'm sure you could do another custom black and white. Yeah. You could do your monochrome mode. You could do a color if you wanted, but then you could do both the. You could do partial color, which is 1, 2, and 3, and then you could go ahead and do any of the grainy film 1, grainy film 2, and just then when you take one shot and you're not quite sure, you can have like 5 different ways to capture a black and white on top of your raw photo.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what is on my camera.
Is it multi-shot?
Let me see. So I'm trying to think of what I would have been doing the last time I actually used this camera.
And it might be because
I'm doing the feed out from from the camera. So we're trying to I just don't get.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well,
I mean,
well, you explained it, so that kind of helps. But man, it would have been nice to be able to actually show it.
Yeah, go through the sequence. So if I go through it slowly while you're kind of playing around with that, if anyone has an Olympus camera, and I'm using the EM1 Mark II, if you hit the menu button and you go to the camera menu 2, you'll see bracketing, and you hit over to the right, you toggle it on, you hit to the right again, you scroll down to art bracket, which is the second from the last one. You hit the arrow over to the right. You have off and on. There's a little arrow over to the right again. You hit over to the right, and then it allows you to go through a whole list of things to select, that you can turn on and off to toggle to shoot in those different filters at once.
Yes. So I disconnected my HDMI out from the camera, and the bracketing becomes ungrayed. So for whatever reason, if you're hooked up to feed out the video or the feed from your camera, you can't go into those bracketing modes. So that's why we couldn't show you guys. Bummer. Did not know that. I learned something new today. All right.
John Thomas is asking what lens is on the camera. Well, I have a 12-100 Pro. What do you have on yours? Was it a 17?
The 12mm f2.
Okay.
Yep. Let's see. No more questions. I haven't honestly looked at the chat in a few minutes.
No, everyone was kind of talking about the gradation and stuff like that.
Okay, good. So if we can do raw conversion to JPEG with these modes to vary highlight, shadows, and curves, filters, etc., to compare some of these modes. Say that. Okay, so do you know if I can do a raw conversion to JPEG with these modes?
You could do. You might be able to if you shot a raw photo. Olympus allows you to edit in camera to kind of mess around with some things. I don't know how far it allows you to push the editing though in the camera, because I know that if I shot something in raw and I want to quickly push it out of the camera, I can do the internal raw processing, but I don't know to what extent you have control over things.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. To be honest, most of the raw processing that I've done in camera has been just to make a JPEG and shoot it out over to my phone to share on social. So I didn't really do any editing. So I'm actually just going to take a quick picture of my screen here, and then I'm just going to try to edit that image. Actually, I'm shooting in raw right now. So let me do this.
Tim says we lost the feed on Justin. I just because you haven't toggled the screen on the bottom.
Oh, there. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I was in timeout.
All right. So I'm just gonna sit here and I'm gonna raw adjust or edit this raw file. So I'm gonna go to
Mike.
custom.
Mike is saying in camera ? So is it in the camera that you're trying to do it?
Yep. In the camera.
Yeah.
So
And Jeff says you can edit them in Workspace too. So you probably have some degree of what Olympus allows you to do in their camera with filters in Workspace, I'm assuming, Jeff, because I've never used it. So,
well, I can tell you. So what you've got exposure compensation, you've got shadow area adjust, midtone area adjust, brighten area adjust. You've got your aspect ratio, noise filter. You can change your color profile from sRGB to Adobe Pro RGB.
Ooh.
And keystone compensation. Those are the ones that I'm seeing, but you can also go and do monochrome. I'm going to say that the monochrome setting that I have set up on my camera right now, that it edited that to that profile that I had saved in monochrome, because the blacks are extremely deep on this because I had deepened up the shadow adjustment. So if that's what you're asking, if you have like that custom black and white mode set up like I did, can you go and after the fact process the raw with that preset that you had baked in? I'm going to say yes.
This is fun. I can do black and white filters after I shot it.
Hey, David.
I can bracket it.
So Tim Hanko, yeah, and Tim, I'm sorry, I know you messaged me the other day asking about this as well. So about bird and flight posts, and do we have time for that? Are you referring to your keeper ratio with the EM1 Mark II? Just pop that in the comments if that's what you're referring to, because I know you messaged me about that the other day, and I haven't gotten back to you on that yet, and I apologize for that. So hopefully that's what Tim is asking about. And if he is, I think I've got a couple of things that I've probably mentioned before, and hopefully you just hadn't heard them, and that's why you haven't had success. But I'll just start talking about that right now because I think that's what Tim was asking about. So he asked the other day, he was telling me that he was having a little bit of trouble with his keeper rate with the EM1 Mark II. I believe the 300 millimeter with both the 1.4 and the 2X teleconverters. So with the EM1 Mark II, I found that my best success rate was always set up with the center 9 focus boxes turned on. Rather than center point or cross, I always use the center 9. And I found really quickly that the camera does a pretty decent job. It just turns out that you need to be really good with your technique at keeping the bird in. So like if we take your viewfinder, your view, and if you remove like the row of focus boxes on either the left or right sides, pretend those don't count anymore. Because I find that once the bird has gotten that far over into the frame, the camera, for me, seems like it had trouble keeping up with it from that point on. So I always try to maintain keeping the bird in the center third of the window or of your view, if possible. And my success rate went up exponentially just by doing that. So again, that was a technique thing for me, being able to track the bird and try to always maintain them, within roughly that. So that gives you room for the bird to move around within that space. So it's not like you have to keep them dead center, but just try to keep them away from the edges of the sensor, basically. Because I think once it gets over there, it just has trouble keeping up. In regards to you specifically mentioning the 1.4 and the 2X teleconverters, I think I'm sure your conversations maybe with Mike Amico had brought this up potentially, and I know I've brought it up before in the past. Specifically with the 2X teleconverter, I think most of the issues people are having are just
technique.
Your focal length is ridiculously long, and even the most minute movement
will translate.
Yes. And so now you're coupling something that's already difficult, which is tracking the bird in flight. Yeah, to capture. Yep. And then now you're adding this whole other level of difficulty to it with that 2X teleconverter. Not to say it can't be done. I admittedly have not gone out chasing birds with the 2X yet and tried to get birds in flight. Everything I've done so far has been perched birds, which it's phenomenal. But I know that when I get out, and I know a couple of spots where I know I can get eagles in flight, and I'll probably be doing that once the weather stays like it is now for a while. I'll be doing that, and I'm pretty sure that I'll be reporting back that it was a learning curve for me all over again. Even with the EM1X, I'm sure it's going to be a learning process to get that technique back in place. The 1.4 teleconverter, I've had zero problems at all on the EM1X. On the EM1 Mark II, same thing I said before. A lot of it was just trying to maintain keeping the bird in the center, third or so of the frame. Again, once the bird starts to get to the edge of the frame, the camera really gave me a lot of difficulty. And I know for a fact, Jeffrey McFeeder says that he's gotten a lot of bird in flight with the 300 and the MC20, because we're buddies and I see his work and I know he's nailing it with that combo. So it can be done. Jeffrey, do you have an opinion on that? If it's more technique than it is 100% reliance on equipment? And also, are you using that on the EM1X or the Mark II, just out of curiosity? Because I'm not sure what camera you have, Jeffrey.
Well, and to add to that, we talked about this last week when we were talking about things, is that the rule of thumb is that you shoot your shutter speed to mitigate shake or to not see any shake, is to shoot at... he's saying increase your shutter speed. So what you have to do, like with the rule of thumb to help you kind of work through that out, is if you're using a 25 millimeter, that's going to be a 50 millimeter, your shutter speed should be a 60th of a second. Now, I think I'm going to make an assumption here that as Olympus shooters, we've gotten a little spoiled by what that image stabilizer does for us. So we can kind of cheat that rule and kind of we're like an exception to that rule some of the times. But as a rule of thumb, if you're shooting a 300 millimeter 600 with a 2X, it's 1200 millimeters, your shutter speed has to be faster than, it's got to be like a 2000th of a second or higher to do birds in flight, because you're essentially using a 1200 millimeter lens. Yeah. Or get a gimbal head, put it on a gimbal.
Right. Another thing too to take into consideration, I'd be curious. It'd be nice if we had sample images from Tim to look at, because another thing, I find that my success rate with panning shots with bird in flight is to switch my image stabilization from auto to, and I'm drawing a blank on whether it's 1 or 2. One of them, it really just takes care of vertical, up and down. And I switch it so that it's just worried about that, because I've gotten really good at just doing a really level pan. Because even though the auto mode detects your primary direction of movement and is supposed to compensate the other axis, I just feel like I've gotten better results if I switch to turning off the horizontal image stabilization, or turning on specifically only the vertical image stabilization, so that my panning shots are better. I generally am not doing like this, following birds around. They're usually eagles, birds of prey, that are in some sort of a glide path, or they're coming in, to pick up food or something like that. So while it is a panning shot, if I am moving in any downward motion, I think it's slow enough to where the vertical stabilization isn't affected by, or the horizontal image stabilization being turned off isn't confused by, me making slight downward moves. But just try to lock the one axis. So again, turn off the horizontal if you're doing panning shots, because you may be getting blur from that. I don't know if you're getting... You
mean turn off the vertical?
So I'm wondering if he's got auto on, and if he's doing panning shots, if
it's confusing.
Correct. Yeah. And again, I know that the auto detect, where it detects the primary axis of movement, is really good. again, my personal, experiences with it are just, I will lock it so that it's only worried about vertical stabilization. I keep the horizontal stabilization off if I'm doing panning shots for birds in flight.
Jeff makes some other good points here. We can go into detail about that, but he's kind of talking about the quality of light, and that if you're shooting an f8, like if you're shooting on a gray day, like there's a reason I call it Michigan gray, is because there's these cameras, as good as they're getting with cross type autofocus points, a lot of it has to do with contrast. Birds don't have horizontal or vertical lines. So on a less than ideal, muddy, contrasty day, a gray day, your quality of light is going to affect how the quality and quantity of that light is going to affect how fast your camera can autofocus. On a day like today, shoot, no trouble. It's a perfect day for autofocus. But he's talking about, with wildlife, the sharpness of the lens is secondary to the speed of acquisition. Most shots I see that aren't as sharp is because it's sharp at the point the bird is no longer at.
Yeah, for sure. And he's using both the EM1X and the EM1 Mark II. And he says the EM1X in his experience is a little better with the 2X teleconverter versus the EM1 Mark II. And I'm not surprised, for sure. Later generation camera, more horsepower behind it. So
yeah, it's the processor. Again, it all boils down to like what processor the camera has. The more brain power a camera has, the more it can compute and react to what you're looking at. So
yep, definitely. All right, let's see if there's any more questions coming in. I'm glad you popped that question in, Tim, and I hope that was what you were looking for. So just jumping back, Elizabeth Chapman said she got her 60 millimeter macro today. Congratulations. Yay. That is a lot of fun.
Have fun.
Yeah, that's my go-to lens in the woods, because I find myself laying in the dirt a lot, taking pictures of mushrooms and moss and things like that with that lens. It's a blast. So Jeffrey said he's heard that the EM1 Mark III is actually a bit better than the EM1X with the 2X teleconverter and birds in flight.
Well,
I'll be finding out soon. I've got the camera here, so I'll give it a shot.
And it is using a newer processor. I mean, the EM1X is using dual 8s, and this one is using a single 9. So, they're just, added advantage to a newer processor.
Newer software, newer algorithms inside. So I guess that's probably about it. We've been running for about an hour on this. I know I want to get out and shoot. It's beautiful outside, and I am dying to get the camera out. Actually, I think I'm dying to get my cell phone out. It sounds like I'm going to be jumping in this challenge. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope to see everybody's images on the Camera Shop of Muskegon's Facebook page for this challenge.
I'll put a post out. It'll be the Facebook photo challenge for this week. You'll add your photos to the comments below. I'll put some of my images. I sent you a couple. I'll put those up as kind of like the header images. And are
these cell phone photos?
Yeah, those are all cell phone that I sent you.
Let me share those because we never did that. So let me get these pulled up real quick.
I a little overkill, but I just went through ones that I thought were, and on my, these are unedited. So these are just, straight out of the phone, which they look really nice on the screen on the phone. Of course, my monitor is not calibrated over here, but
no, they look good over here on my screen. They look really good. Hey, so before we talk about the photo here, where was this shot? I like this spot.
It's in Marquette. It's beautiful.
Oh, it's gorgeous, man. Gorgeous.
Yeah. There's a lot just in Marquette up there. In fact, I want to just that's going to be base camp and just kind of go from there for everything.
Cool. And this is a spot I have not yet been up there, and I really want to go. And shots like this make me want to go more. So this is right to the clouds?
No. This is actually Sugarloaf Mountain in Marquette.
Oh my gosh.
This is 15 minutes away from that bridge, 15, 20 minutes away from that bridge.
And we're going to have to talk after the show. You got some sweet spots up there. Very nice.
I do have some sweet spots. And you know what the funny thing is? So since we're talking about this, if you guys want the best photo advice I can give you. My buddy Tim and I went up there for fall this year. We thought we missed it because it was the tail end of October, and we hit it like in peak. You know, it was just like, it was perfect. Another week later was going to be gone, and we went to. We were going to just stay in Munising. I said, let's go to Marquette. It's a bigger city.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can, there are probably more hotels, motels, and there's just more food or something. We can just have more choices in food. So we go there and we're just walking around on the street looking for a place to eat. We stop and get a beer and they're like, oh, we don't serve food. But the bartender was really nice. And believe it or not, 6 degrees of separation, right? 2 guys from Muskegon up in Marquette, Michigan. This girl's like, where are you guys from? Like, oh, we're from Muskegon. She's like, oh, I am too. She's like, I grew up over here, and I lived off Getty for like 7 years. And I said, so what's good up here? Like, what's good to photograph? What's good in this area? And she, like, all of a sudden she just started writing down all these things. She's like, well, my dad was up here last year, and this is like, these are the things he found. And so she says, you need to go to this spot. You need to go to this spot. And since she's like a mountain biker, kind of an outdoors person, kind of like most of the people in Colorado and the Denver area, because she's active like that, she had like, all these spots are the beautiful spots. This is where a lot of people go.
Nice.
And from there we went to another place, and the girl who was our server to serve us food, she was from Muskegon at Mona Shores, and her dad shoots too. And so he's like, oh yeah, he was up here and he liked this spot. So we got all from just asking 2 total strangers. We got the locals will tell you the best spots to go to.
Sure.
So those are my secret spots were just their common spots. So yeah.
Nice. Common. Well, probably common for the locals and not so much for
for us.
For what are we, trolls? You know?
Yeah. Don't call us that. I'm not a fan of that.
No, it's horrible. It's so horrible.
I hate it. We live south of the bridge. We don't live under the bridge.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
These lopers.
Right.
Yeah. I took this yesterday, actually. I wish there were clouds in the sky. But I just really, really beautiful shot. Just fun.
Definitely gorgeous for sure. So I like your, that's a really good tip. So get to know the locals.
Yeah. Go get a beer. Like, you're thirsty. Go talk to somebody.
It's funny that like, some of your best, finds were just found when you were stopping to get a quick beer or a sandwich somewhere or whatever, and it's just basic conversation with people, and that's all it takes. I'm doing something right now, Justin. Just keep talking. I want to do something really quickly. So just give me a moment.
I guess I'm trying to think of other tips I've gotten from other people. It's, I try to go out, and if I've got buddies in other states, like I've got my buddy Ashton, who's a big outdoors person in Colorado. He lives in Montrose, and we go out that way. And we were going to do a car camp, but it was really, we just went out every single day to a different spot. And I mean, your best resource is like, if you stop in somewhere, don't be afraid to ask people. Like, you just say, hey, I'm not from around here, but we're out here, we're taking photos. As some people don't like to hear your story, but like if you're in the service industry, like that's kind of part of your gig. And so it's like talking to your barber, right? Your barber's heard the same conversation through, hundreds of people over the last 50 years. Ask him about women, he'll tell you. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like, don't be shy about asking the people who you stop with. Because even the hotel we stayed at in Marquette, we stayed at a small place outside Marquette. She dropped her price like that Monday. She's like, yeah, it was up on Sunday, but she's like, I just wanted to get some people to fill the room. So I did this really good deal. We spent it was like under $75 for rooms for the night. And it was right on the highway. And she said, well, in the summer, if the northern lights are out, she's like, I turn off all the property lights, and and you can they just basically light up the property, and you can just walk across the street to this bike path and just set up and shoot. It's great.
Nice.
Yeah.
So there you go. Somehow though, there are no clouds reflected in the water, but there you have clouds at your bench.
That's what you were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just threw it into Luminar 4 and just used their AI sky replacement.
Yeah, that's fun.
But probably another 5 minutes in that, you could probably make it probably semi-believable, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I know some tricks. I could make it work.
For sure, without a doubt. All right. Well, cool. It's been good hanging out this Sunday as well. And again, I'm always open to do these. If you guys want to keep doing them with the camera store, just let me know, Justin. It looked like we had a good crowd today. Good questions, really good questions. So I appreciate those that came in today, as well as the insights and input from others, especially Jeffrey. He's a wealth of knowledge. Again, an incredible photographer.
Does he do double exposure stuff?
Yeah, he does some really good exposure stuff.
Yeah, I found him. I actually had him in conversation with Mike and I last week on Wednesday. Because we were talking about double exposure, and I said, "Hey, I found your stuff on the EM1 Enthusiast page. Yeah. I really love it. Can we share it?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, like by all means." And then he sent me a link to Flickr. He's like, "Oh, here's some more if you need some more." And it was just okay. So now that I know that he shoots black and white, it's like, Jeff, what don't you do? What else are you hiding under that the Facebook rock of EM1 Enthusiast page?
Yeah, start digging through his work is pretty mind-blowing. He's a great guy in general anyway, so that's always a bonus.
Well, and he's got good work. It's really solid. So
without a doubt. All right, buddy, I am out of here. I'm going to pack up some camera bags. I'm going to jump in my truck and drive down a dirt road that I've never been down before and see what I find.
There you go.
All right, you guys take care. Thanks for tuning in this week. We'll see you around.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week.